Right, welcome everyone. This is the part 6 of vRealize Operations Webinar Series 2016. We have finished almost half the year with this webinar series, and I'm excited about delivering these sessions month after month. Thanks to Simon, Ivan, and other people who've been supporting us in creating these presentations, providing some of the content, and at the same time providing labs so that we can go ahead and deliver this to you. I'm happy that Simon and myself decided we would jump into content, which is more around the usage of vRealize operations. And today we'll talk about two specific topics of SuperMetrics and Views. SuperMetrics specifically around, and Views both around what are the use cases, how do you create them, what are the best practices, etc. Views would be covered by Simon while I will be pitching in, and for SuperMetrics, I will take it forward. So some of the housekeeping items before we move forward. We are recording this session, so you will have the recording available on our blogs at the end of the session or within 24 hours from the session. You have all the other sessions recordings available already on our blog sessions or blog links and YouTube, so you can visit that if you want to go ahead and visit some of the old content. If you have any questions, then we will cater to those at the end of the presentation. But if you have something which you want to put out, you can use the chat window and ask your question. You're all muted on entry, so you'll not be able to speak for now, but in case you need to, you can use the chat window, or you can use *6 in case you want to speak and not chat. For any technical issues, you can always send out an email to my email address, VMware ID, and we'll be able to help you out pertaining to this webinar. And we don't have the feedback survey, but we would definitely love feedback. So you can send an email, or you can get in touch with us on social media, and we'd be happy to take all your feedback and incorporate that in our future sessions. So today our speakers would be Simon Eady, who works for Extrovert and blogs at Define. I call it Define IT, Simon, or you call it definite.co.uk.
Yeah, we're definite, yeah.
And myself, Sunny. I'll hand it over to Simon for him to cover the part of Views, and then I'll take up SuperMetrics. Simon, over to you, man.
Okay, good morning. So here's the agenda of what we're going to cover today. We'll look at views. We'll look at the terminology, what are views, how we create views and how we can use them, how you tie them into reporting, and right at the end of that section, how you import, export, and clone views. After that bit, which shouldn't be too long, Sunny will kick off from there and cover us on SuperMetrics, which will be a little bit more in-depth, and then we'll do some Q&A at the end. If you have any questions, as Sunny said, as we go along, just send a question to Sunny, and he'll pause it at an appropriate time while I'm going on about views, and then vice versa while Sunny's talking about SuperMetrics. If you want to send me a question while he's presenting on SuperMetrics, we'll field it when we can, and we'll do some Q&A at the end as well. Okay, so views. In vROps, for those of you that used it, you'll be aware that reporting was quite limited. There were some good out-of-the-box reports with vROps. It was extremely difficult to customize. With the custom view, you couldn't do anything reporting or views from there. It was something I think became, the customers at the end of the day were saying to VMware, we really want to use vROps for reporting. You've got some great information in there, but we're a bit limited on how we can do reporting from vROps. VMware clearly took that on board. With 6.1, or rather just 6 and 6.1, of vROps. Along came reporting, custom reports, custom views. You can drag and drop from the UE. There's an awful lot of power and strength in there. With all the information that you're getting from vROps, from all your adapters, it's very evident that, you know, the strength behind it, you can create some fantastic scheduled reports for your manager or for yourself. You can get some C-level reporting going in there. You know, you want to be able to justify stuff, you know, new purchases, or turn around and say, yep, look, we're doing a great job. Look at this. These are the improvements from here to here. All that kind of thing. You could build views. They're the sort of core component of reporting. There are 6 different types of views, but we'll cover those in a moment. I mean, the views and the terminology. You can see there are lots and lots of different ways of presenting the data and the different types of data. It's an independent object. There are 6 different types of views, as I've said already. Views can be created by any user. I put it in red there, but you need the correct privileges. So if you're going to give users the ability, let's say it's someone that doesn't necessarily want to be using vROps or creating lots of dashboards, but they want to generate reports, you can add a user in there and give them access just to do that. Out of the box, there are an awful lot of views. You can see a list of them there at the bottom of that slide, and there's a lot more than that. But it will give you an idea and a good introduction to using the views and reports. These are the 6 different current view types. I believe in the future, VMware are planning for some more. I've not seen or heard of what they may or may not be, but there's lots of options for you already. Typically, the first 3 are quite commonly used, and the number 6 there is summary. Text and image is a bit more sort of custom and bespoke if you really need to go down that way. All right, so what we're going to do, I'm not going to spend ages sort of going through some decks showing you how you do it manually and looking. I'm going to actually present from my lab so you can see how it's put together. This is my lab at home, in case anybody was wondering. So this is not a production system, as it were. So how do we get to the views? Well, if you're on the home page here, you need to go to content here, or you can click it here. This menu, as many of you already know, is static. So if I was to click here, you can see this left-hand nav bar change. You can see lists of your dashboards. What we're interested in here are the views. And these are all of the out-of-the-box views. You can see there's 184. So you're spoilt for choice. Not all of these are out of the box, because I do have a few management packs. This here is a good example of views that the Cisco UCS management pack has introduced. So if you are using management packs on your system, there's a good chance that they will introduce some custom views for you. Okay, so we want to create a view. We would click that green icon on the top left corner. We can give our view a name. So let's talk about CPU ready, for instance, something like that. If you want some help as you're going along, let's say you can't reference this video or you don't have a book, there's actually some helpful information over here on the right-hand side, and even a click-through video there to some stuff that VMware has produced as well. So you are not on your own while you're doing this. So we want to decide how we're going to display the data. So I think in this instance, we'll do perhaps a summary. So we'll drag that over. Subject. So what are we interested in? CPU ready. So if we're going to be looking at that, something that has a CPU, you're going to be going to the vCenter adapter. As you can see, these are all the other different adapters. You've got AWS, which I've got hooked up here. You want to go to the appropriate adapter. So 9 times out of 10, you're going to go to the vCenter adapter. Now, you might be interested in the host, but this time I'm interested in the virtual machines. You can, if you want, add more subjects if you want. In this case, I'm not going to bother. Again, you've got help on the right-hand side here. So data, this is where it's at. So the top right here, you can have sample data, or you can preview from a source. I'll show you that in a little bit, but essentially what you can do, if you tick that, you can automatically refresh. We can select the preview source. In fact, I'll do that now. Why not? So we'll select, let's have a look. Select just the groups at the top. So, oh yeah, that's a good thing actually. If you notice this, when you're presented with this menu, you're thinking, hang on a minute, where is everything? This drop down is not always particularly obvious. So if we go to, let's have a look. Let's just use that for a moment. And that's going to want something more VM specific, I think. Going very quickly here, guys.
Looking for a metric or something.
Yeah. We could select that. Oh yeah, it's going to be whining an awful lot, isn't it? Yep. Let me just go back. Let's cancel that for a second because I'm going to need to.
Yep.
Okay. So CPU ready. So I'm interested in the CPU ready. Why is CPU important? You don't want high CPU ready. So if you're not sure if you have or don't have it, you can go in here and have a look for it. Where are we? CPU ready. There we are. Right. So I'm interested in percentage. So we drag it across. Now, a couple of things here. You can choose the sort order, transformation. You can do averages, the last. So typically, I'd like to go with a minimum, and then what we'll do is we'll do a maximum. I'm going to go along quite quickly here, but you'll see what I'm doing is presenting 3 different types of data, time settings for the last 7 days. You can introduce a filter if you want. You can put in a summary if you want. You can show advanced settings here, so you can choose the roll-up interval. Oops. So that was minimum, average. So let's go back here, CPU ready. So what happens when I rush it a little bit? Maximum.
Yep. You would do a summary as well because you selected a summary column.
Yeah. I know.
I'd rather select list.
Yeah.
You have to do the. So a good learning when you change the view, you would have to do the metrics once again.
Subjects. This is what happens when you get up too early in the morning. Virtual machine. All right, here we go. So CPU ready. Okay, so nearly there. So we want the minimum CPU ready. We're going to go with the maximum. And we're going to go with the average. Okay, time settings. Well, I'm happy for the last 7 days. You can change that to be whatever you want. You can see the data based on this virtual machine. It'd be kind of nice if we showed it more, but if I very quickly change that to something a little bit bigger scope.
Yep.
There we go. That's a bit more interesting. Now, a lot of these VMs that you're seeing here, the reason there's no data is because there isn't any. A lot of these VMs are switched off now. But you'll see the visibility here. So you can make these available in the dashboards and the widgets, details environment. So there's lots of ways you can actually present the data and make it visible. You can blacklist information here as well, so you don't include other bits and pieces. You can add further analysis if you want as well. Save that particular view. What did we call it? CPU ready, wasn't it? There it is there. Right, so we've created our first custom view. We can, if we want, edit it. What I'll do is I'll collapse this, and you can see if we select from preview data again, how it actually looks. And if I order this by, one important thing here, because as you can see at the top, the heading isn't particularly helpful in the way it presents the way it's doing here. What you can do is you can edit this by putting in a metric label. This is quite important. So if I just put min, max, and average. And we'll save that again. I'll go back into it. But the view is what it is. It's just one component of the report. So again, just going back in, selected at the vCenter level. Order it by minimum, or if we want, we can order it by maximum. So yeah, you can see this one here has been taking a bit of a beating on my lab. That's a good example, actually. So high CPU ready percentage over 7 days is bad. But that's not what we're here for. But you can see that that's presented it there in that particular fashion. And there are lots of ways of displaying data. So this particular one here is in list format. You can do it in summary format and other bits and pieces. Now, I'm mindful that we're going to be going on to SuperMetrics in the next while. So what we'll do is we'll move on now, guys, to constructing a report. Now, this is quite a popular subject because a lot of businesses, they will buy vROPs for the reporting and the views, that it'll be sold on those merits because it is indeed very, very strong in that area. Managers are keen for obviously alerting from it and seeing what's actually going on in the environment. But then the next question that they'll have for you is, what reports do you have for me? You know, what's actually going on? You know, because your manager might be going up to a C-level meeting and say, you know, give me something here that shows that we're doing a good job, or give me something here. If we're going to be going and buying a new cluster, the boss wants to know why, you know, what's going on. So reporting is a real tool or a weapon in your arsenal for getting what you need for your environment or highlighting issues in your environment. So, you know, if you're trying to explain to your boss that, you know, this cluster's in meltdown, I'm utilizing it as, you know, as much as possible. Perhaps your boss doesn't quite understand, or maybe they think that you could squeeze in a few more VMs. You can give them the hard facts in a report. So the reports here on the left-hand side, you get a lot of template reports there. If you look at the top here, you've got the existing out-of-the-box reports, and there are quite a few. I mean, you can see here there's 59. So you're kind of spoiled for choice. Bear in mind that a lot of these reports are subject-based, so they're not a report that can run on everything. But you can see here in the subjects, you know, cluster compute, data store, data center, mount points, resource pools, virtual machines. You know, you've got a good start. But what if I want to check what was run? You can see here I ran reports in the past, talking about stressed VMs, oversized VMs, and these ones here, PDFs, CSVs, those are the outputs, and you can indeed schedule the reports as well. So if I want to build a report, we need to create a new template. So we'll just call it VM report. Again, on the right-hand side, you've got this useful little widget which helps guide you through. If you're not too sure, you can get more information or click the link through to the video, which I think takes you through to the VMware YouTube channel. So if I want to bring in the data type, you can bring in either dashboards or views, but today we're interested in the views. We'll do a quick search for Subviews. We're going to include the one that I created there, just for instance. We'll look for something more virtual machine based. So let's have a look. Let's have a look. Yeah, we'll grab that one. Maybe not that one. There we go. So, actually, what would be good with a CPU-ready one would be oversized. Maybe not. I'm jumping ahead of myself here. Yeah, we'll just grab that one for now. Cool. Okay. Anything else we want to grab? We could go hardware summary. You can see you can just literally drag and drop. There's nothing really complicated about how you do it. So those are existing views. You can choose how the data's presented. You go PDF, CSV. You can untick them if you want. I leave them on. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't want to use both. Just a bit of flexibility. You can decide to include a cover page, table of contents, and a footer if you want. I'll show you how they look once it's run. And we're going to save that. And there's our VM report. Now, if you're going to run the report, running it from here, you need to select the source of data before you run a report. So what we'll do, we'll go into the environment. We're going to choose, we'll go all objects. And we'll choose vCenter server, so we'll choose that one there. And we're going to run a report against that. There's our VM report, there it is. Okay, so we're going to run that template here. These buttons will come to in a moment, and you'll see the number of reports that have been generated against it, 0, and there are no schedules currently set. And it tells you when it was last modified as well, and by who's the owner. Right. Oh, and also when last run, if you're really interested in that. While it's running, you can see it's running, very clear, very simple. Looks like it's run the report already, so we'll go to generated reports, and there it is. Still processing. Okay, our report's done now when it refreshes. We'll have a look on the generated reports. And what we can do here, this is where, here we go. So this is the report that we've put together. It gives you the date stamp of when you run it, what it was run against, the contents of it. So those would be the views. There's your CPU ready. So obviously that's containing all of the VMs in my environment because that's the way I've opted for it with the list format. Obviously doesn't come out so great there. So these are things to bear in mind, you know, run these reports beforehand in terms of how they're going to turn out. Remember, you can, let me just close that a second. If that particular view is no good to you, you can run it in an Excel format and you can grab the data however you want. I'll report here. So we'll scroll down. You can see all of the virtual machines in my lab. No virtual machine CPUs are diagnosed. Which report was that one? That was the much bigger one. I'm not too sure if there's a way of changing the format of the PDF. Sonny, are you aware of a way?
Yeah, so there are certain things which you can. There are certain things which you can change, which is the header and the footer and the other stuff. But if you talk about the tables, then they will actually depend on the view itself. It will entirely depend on how the view was laid out, and based on the view, you will get what you asked for at the end of the day.
Yeah, so we might be.
So what I would do mostly is that I would go ahead and present the entire report, let's say to a customer, and then ask him what are the important columns for them and then get rid of the columns which are not required. And that way it makes it more cleaner and more useful. And I have a bunch of them which I've created for customers, and they use it for various different purposes. Like some of the use cases would be around pushing these reports out into a, let's say, a centralized NAS location, or sending an email out every morning to, let's say, the IT head, etc., in terms of what is the capacity remaining on all the clusters which you have in your virtual infrastructure, where scheduling comes into picture.
Yeah. Okay, so what we've done, we go back to the deck very quickly here. So we've covered reports. You can see how the reports intertwine there with views, and you can see how the views intertwine not just with reports, but with dashboards. We've run a report already, but I'm going to show you something very quickly here. So if you wanted to clone, export, or import, the cloning option there you can see from the top of the menu. I'm going to go back in a second and show you. But you can import and export and clone your views and reports very easily. I'm going to jump along to SuperMetrics very shortly, guys, which I'm sure that's the bit you're most excited about. If you want to schedule a report, so you select the report that you're interested in. You click Schedule Report, and you can then decide what time zone it's run, when it starts, the start date, the reoccurrence. I mean, you can go to town here. As you can see, I don't have anything specified here. But, yeah, that's how you schedule a report and decide where it's going to go. This is where you import and export templates. So if you need to back them up for whatever reason or share them, you can do so. And that's where you can clone the templates there. And it's the same for views as well. And that is a very quick overview of views and reporting. Any questions before we move on to SuperMetrics with Sunny?
I see no questions on the chat window so far.
That's great. It's fairly self-explanatory. Yep. I mean, views and reports will make you might not be best friends with your manager, but it will certainly help. It's great. It's a great way of getting information out of the system.
Yep, absolutely. So there are a few things which I want to add to that piece as well, because I've been using the views and reports for some time now with customers. And one thing which I would highly recommend is that if you are planning to create a report, or if you're planning to use any out-of-the-box report, then it's always a good idea to clone that out-of-the-box report and then edit it for your use case and then make changes, etc.
Yeah, that's good.
The reason I was not use the out-of-the-box content directly into my production environment is because sometimes when VMware decides to upgrade from one version to a newer version of vROps, they might kill or may modify the out-of-the-box content, and they do give a warning about that in the release note. So if you're using these reports for production, just use any of them. If you want to, just clone them out, give them your friendly name, and then you can use them as per your requirement. So that's one small tip which might help you before you go down, using out of the box in a big way.
Yeah, that's good advice. Yeah, there's nothing worse than using, maybe you've customized an out-of-the-box report heavily, and you lose that customization after an upgrade or a service or a fix. That would be teeth-grindingly annoying if you've put a lot of work in. So that's great advice, Sonny.
Yep. I think there's a question from Santosh, and he's asking if there are any plans of adding. So it's more of a roadmap question. I believe I would have to take that.
Yeah.
So any plan for adding out of the box reporting on customers' infra, or adding more views in the reporting templates for finding detailed reporting? I think the question is more around that we need more. So it's around, can I have more details on reports or more information out of the infrastructure? So I think the answer to that, Santosh, is that VMware has given you ways to create them, but yeah, there might not be specific or all the use cases which are met today. I can call out a certain use cases where you can't do three-dimensional reports, right? Wherein you're trying to say that, for instance, I want all the virtual machines where, or I had a use case the other day. I want all the, this one. I want the VMs and the list of hosts on which they're running on. So that relationship itself was not available for a metric, for instance. Hence, it could not be reported on. So there might be corner cases which you might not be able to report on because that metric or that property today is not available. And yes, I mean, of course, as we have seen the release from VMware on various editions, you would see more and more data coming in and more meaningful data coming in, which you can utilize for reporting and views for sure. But yeah, if you have any specific use cases, Santosh, you know my email address, so let me know and I'll be able to help you out. All right, so I think it's time to jump onto SuperMetrics now. Let me quickly share my screen, Simon.
Yep, go for it. I shall
and I'll make you the host. Change role to presenter. And where is Simon? Change role to host. Okay, Simon, you are in the control of this meeting now.
Okay.
All right, let me just share my screen. And I believe I will need to swap the display. There you go.
There we go. Awesome.
Good, Simon? Okay.
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay. Awesome. All right, so SuperMetrics. This topic is a long topic, but I tried to summarize it as much as possible into this 1 hour session which we are doing today. And this is close to my heart because this helps me and helps me get out of situations which are sometimes difficult. Now, what I mean to say is SuperMetrics help me create synthetic metrics which can basically satisfy a lot of requirements of customers and of IT admins, which I face on a day-to-day basis, especially when I work with vROps. So I'm sure this session will help you learn some of those tips and tricks and save your day when it comes to finding out that synthetic metric which is not available out of the box within vROps. So as the name suggests, these are metrics created above and beyond the available set of metrics in vROps. So when you're in a situation where you do not find a metric either available, collecting, or maybe if it's there in the policy but not collecting, and you've seen all those avenues but still you're not able to find a metric, then there might be a mathematical formula which you will be able to use by creating, or you might be able to use and create a new metric out of it, which is a SuperMetric. There are things which you need to take care of and understand before you go that path. So I will try to tell you some about those basics today before we go ahead and start going into the lab and creating some SuperMetrics. Things like objects and attributes. So you need to understand what is an object in vROps, what is an attribute. You need to understand the relationships between objects, and you need to figure out who's a parent and who's a child in those relationships. It's not difficult to find that out. You can find that information out within vROps. Or if you've been working with vROps for some time, then you would know that at the back of your hand. Then it comes to the design phase. So this is interesting that you just don't go ahead and create a SuperMetric out of the box. It's important that you go ahead and design it. You understand how your mathematical formula will give you the output which you're looking for, and then work towards it. And then comes the formula pieces, where what all you can do from a mathematical formula perspective, and some of the considerations and use cases which I've learned from the field, and some of the content which I'm using is actually delivered by Mark Jusko, who's a part of the VMware Professional Services organization, and he's done some good job in terms of combining those considerations and use cases together, and I'll be sharing them out with you guys. All right, so starting with objects and attributes. Object types and associated attributes in the foundation are which are used for building up SuperMetrics, right? I mean, if you talk about a VM, or a VMX, it's an object, right? But the object type of that VMX is basically virtual machine. And then you have other object types such as host system, data store, and other object types that come in with third-party management packs as well. So all those are object types, right? If you are using all these object types and you are willing to figure out or create a new metric on these object types, then you need to basically, that's how you will do it. I mean, that's when you're required to use SuperMetrics, right? It will help you to create a synthetic SuperMetric value or a metric value. If you look at SuperMetric, they will rely on one or more objects in most of the cases, right? So for instance, you can see I have an object 1, which has a metric 1 and has a value to it, and I'm adding it to a second object type and or the same object type and a second object and adding a second metric to it and creating a new value out of it. So for instance, I want the sum of total data store space which I have allocated. Then I'll look at each data store and get the allocated space for each data store in my environment, add them up, and I'll get the total allocated data store space. So that's an example, right, where data store is an object type, and each data store would be an object, and the allocation space would be the metric. So I'll take that metric from each of the data stores, add them up, and come up with a new metric, which is calculated every 5 minutes, and that will give me the total allocated space in my environment for data store. So that's one simple example, and you can use it in different ways and different mathematical functions. So before we dive in, let's just understand a little bit about objects and attributes. So this slide basically does a good job of explaining that, right? And it also tells you that how do you enable attributes and objects and the underlying supermetrics which can be collected through that. So if you look at the internal structure on the top right-hand corner, right, you will see that you have adapter types. Now that it could be a vCenter adapter or a Cisco adapter or a HP adapter, from where you are basically defining relationships and trying to fetch data from a source. Then you have object type. So object type would be defined within the adapter type, and for every object, you will have different attribute types. Now, in this example, the adapter type is a vCenter adapter, and that's basically fetching data from the vCenter server. And one of the objects within that adapter would be virtual machine, and one of the attribute type for that virtual machine would be CPU demand megahertz, right? Now, those are all types. But if you talk about instances, which is for every vCenter, so let's say VC prod, under VC prod, I have a VM, which is VM_test1. And for that, I am calculating or fetching the metric CPU demand megahertz, right? So that's the metric for that particular attribute. The attribute is CPU demand megahertz, while the metric exactly is what I'm fetching for that particular object, which is VM_test. And that metric would have a value which is defined in the database, right? Now, in order to make sure that I want to enable or disable a particular metric or a supermetric, I would have to come and do that through policies. If you guys get an opportunity, you can review our first and second session, I believe, which was on policies, where we do get into details of how policies are used. And there is where you will get an idea in terms of how we collect or override attributes within a particular policy. So in this screenshot, you can see that from here I can come and disable or enable an attribute for a particular object or for all the objects in my environment. When we do a demo, we'll probably try to showcase some of this stuff. Then comes the part of the object relationships. Now, this is very important because SuperMetrics can actually traverse through these relationships. That is something which is very exciting because that opens up avenues for you to summarize data at a higher level. And when I say that, what I'm trying to say is that let's say if you want to figure out what is the average CPU usage, right, on each VM, or let's say a group of 100 VMs in a cluster, then you can do that. You can do that with SuperMetrics. You can take the average CPU usage of each VM or any VM, and then apply that metric at a parent level, and that could be a host or a cluster, and that will basically give you the average CPU utilization of the entire population under that particular cluster. And that is where a relationship and understanding of relationship is very important, right? So you can either roll up or roll down calculations of SuperMetrics by using the parent-child relationships, which are basically built with north and south. And not north and south, you can't use east and west relationships to traverse. Okay, so we will do some of this stuff, and I'm sure you will see a bunch of use cases coming in your mind when you learn this. All right, so what are SuperMetrics? So as we mentioned in the beginning of this session, and also on my blog post when I was announcing this session, is that with a couple of probably for the past or the next 2 or 3 months, we'll focus on content because it's the heart of the product. You can install, design, and do everything with the product, but it's important that you're able to operationalize it and use it more and more. And that will only happen if you have content within your environment, right? And that content can help you solve multiple use cases, reporting, dashboarding, etc., right? Alerting, etc. So with SuperMetrics is also a part of content. You can import it, edit it, clone it, export it, and that's how it becomes more exciting, because you can create a SuperMetric in one environment, and if you're using it, let's say with one customer of yours or in one environment of yours, you can export them and simply import them in other environments and start reusing them pretty easily. So it's a one-time effort is what I'm trying to say, right? So while we do the demo, we'll go through the panel and explain you how it looks like and what all you need to do on the SuperMetrics panel. But one thing which is important to understand is that it's under the content tab, and there's where you can do everything related to SuperMetrics in terms of creating, editing, cloning, deleting, etc. Okay, so this is how the panel looks like. So when you go and start creating or managing a SuperMetric, the entire panel comes up, and where you can do multiple things. So I have a slide which explains this. So on the top left-hand side is where you can do formula creation. So there is where you will say whether you want to add 2 metrics, you want to divide, you want to subtract, you can do sine, cos, tan, and all kind of stuff. So that's where the formula is created. Now the formula is created either on objects or object types. So that those 2 widgets or windows allow you to select what formula or on what object or object types you want to create that formula. And then if you then you can basically set up relative formulas or referenceable formulas, right? So relative formulas are created on the basis of metrics, where you are selecting a specific metric of a particular object and applying that to a particular metric. And then you can also use attribute types, which makes the formula more referenceable. So I will be able to use that attribute type across different object types if I have to. So that's how the panel looks like. And when we look at the use cases, it will help you understand it better. Okay, so as I said, you can do a SuperMetric formula or a combination of formulas by using sum, average, count, min, max, etc. Now these are the most commonly used ones. I use average and sum a lot, and within those I use mathematical operators such as divide or add or subtract, etc. And those help you derive some cool values which you might not be able to get out of the box. And we'll look at some of those examples which I have in my lab. When you're building the formula, it's important to know that you will fail. So that's something which I learned over a period of time. You will not be able to, or you might not be able to get everything right in the first go. But don't lose heart. It takes some time to understand how the intricacies of SuperMetrics, or what are the intricacies of SuperMetrics, and how you can apply them at different levels. Now, I did talk about identifying what objects and talk about where to store SuperMetrics. So that is where relationships and depths come into picture. Now, if you look at this particular example, right, it's important that you understand who is a parent, what is a child, and how the entire hierarchy works. Now, if you've ever built an application within vROps, then you will automatically know that when you build an application, you get the option to define tiers, and on each tier, you can add virtual machines. So here is one example where an application has 2 tiers, and on each tier, you have 2 virtual machines each, right? Now, if you want to use a metric at the virtual machine level, but you want to derive or store that metric at the application level, then you will be able to use that by using the option of depth. So you can see that where I'm pointing the mouse, you can select the option of depth equal to 1, equal to 2, and so on and so forth. What this basically means is it allows you to traverse from one object and go above to the parent if you have to. So just to give you an example, if I want to find out at the application level that which is the virtual machine which is doing the max CPU usage, right, then I will be able to do that by using the depth option. So I will take CPU usage on all those 4 VMs. So I will take just a simple metric of CPU usage in the formula, and I will say which one is doing the max, and then apply the depth of 2. And when I say that, the SuperMetric will actually traverse 2 paths, which is from VM to tier to application, and then get me the max CPU usage on any of those 4 VMs at the application layer and give me the result. So that is how you can use the depth option within SuperMetrics. And I do have a few examples for you when I go through creating some of these. So, yep, I was talking about depth over here. So here are more information on how you can use depth. Things like you can do positive or negative depth. So if you want to go below to the successor, then you will be able to do that as well. If you are wrong with any of those depths, then you will automatically see a red line under your SuperMetric, which will tell you that you're using something or doing something wrong, and your formula is wrong. So you will be able to change it, or you have to change it to make sure that things work for you. At the same time, it's important to understand that you can either reference a SuperMetric to a particular object, or you can reference that metric from that object by using the this feature. The this feature basically makes the SuperMetric free from referencing to a specific object. And when I test them in the lab, and you will see what I mean, because when I select or when I create a formula without using the this feature, it will automatically be applied to one particular object. And those SuperMetrics are not cool because they are tied down to a particular object, and you'll not be able to export and import them and use them. But when you use the this feature, it basically means that you are not referencing them to a particular object, but you're referencing them to any object type. So you will be able to use them, export them, and import them in different environments. One more important thing, that sometimes the metrics which vROps stores, for most of the metrics, are stores as array of numbers. So for instance, if we are looking at CPU usage as one of the metric for a virtual machine, then it might have 20 values in the backend as an array. And you might not be able to plot that value in the SuperMetric straight away, and hence you might have to use things like average or AVG in brackets to average out and get a single value out of it, because you will not be able to do addition, subtraction, division on an array of numbers. You have to get one number out of it, and that's where you use the average function or the sum function on SuperMetrics. All right. some more data points over here around what exactly you can do or how you should build your formula. I will not go through them. I'd rather love to demonstrate them to you as we go forward. Okay. So attributes, supermetrics, they're all stored in the FSDB as statistics. So it's important that you size your environment accordingly as well. So this basically goes back to our architecture discussion and sizing discussion which we had. If you're planning to build a bunch of supermetrics and then if the number goes into hundreds, then you need to understand that each supermetric which you're creating is actually creating a data point, and that will be stored in the database, and that will use CPU, memory, and disk, as I said. So it's important that you don't go crazy with supermetrics. You make them or use them for relevant purposes. And even before you create a supermetric, you first go ahead and look at finding if there is a metric which already will be able to fulfill your requirement, rather than just going ahead and creating because you know how to create them, right? So that's important. And then there are specific practices around deleting supermetrics as well. So just do not go ahead and delete them if you don't need it. There is a specific method of deleting them in terms of making sure that you disable them first, untag from the objects they were tagged to, and then delete them, and so on and so forth. I do have a couple of slides around that as well, so I'll talk about deleting supermetrics as well. Some things which I do, I make sure that I go ahead and test the supermetrics first on a subset of objects. So I do keep test objects on which I can test them, or I do them in my lab first before I start deploying them in the production environment. It is important because you don't want to create a clutter of data of something which you've done wrong in your formula, and because of which there is a bunch of data which is being calculated and filled up, and it's filling up the database. So it's always important that you have a small lab setup where you can test a supermetric, ensure that it's giving you the result that you want, and then if you're happy and satisfied with everything, you go ahead and import them in your production environments so that you do not face issues in production. You can always visualize the data, and people have a question, right? What if I don't have a test environment? What if I need to do them in production directly? You can do that, but make sure that you use the visualize supermetric capability, which basically allows you to create a supermetric, and before enabling it, you can basically go ahead and visualize what is the output of that supermetric on past data. So, for instance, if you are trying to, let's say, calculate or convert memory utilization from KB to GB, then you will basically take the existing memory utilization KB value and divide it by 1024 into 1024, which basically means that you're converting KBs to MBs and then to GBs. And when you're doing that, you do not have to apply this to your environment to see the output, but you can first do a visualize option to see what or how the metric will come out on a particular host or a particular data store, etc., depending upon what metric you're applying to. And that will give you some data points from the past, which will help you understand how supermetrics are calculated. So tips to keep you on track. So before creating a supermetric, make sure an attribute does not already exist. So this is something which I was talking about. There are situations when you already have attributes available, and people still go ahead and create a supermetric thinking that they're not available. What you actually need to do is you need to go ahead and check the policy, and inside the default policy, check if that particular attribute might be available, but VMware might have disabled it out of the box because they're not sure if people will want to use it or not. So they have a bunch of attributes which are available but disabled by default. So you would just have to go ahead and enable them, and you don't even have to create a supermetric in that case. So that is something important. So make sure before you start creating a supermetric, just go ahead and check if they are already available in in the policy. The other thing which I would want to talk about is that you would have to do some homework around naming conventions of SuperMetrics. I remember doing engagements where I start with 4 or 5 SuperMetrics and then end up in around 50 of them. And then it becomes really difficult to track them within the policy for enabling or disabling them on different objects. So if you want to make your life easier and simpler, it's important that you do standard naming conventions on your SuperMetric, and it should actually make sense. So for instance, if you are doing VM CPU demand in gigahertz, then you should name it properly. Now, just not leave it as VM CPU demand, because people will not understand whether it's in gigahertz or megahertz, etc. Now, that naming convention actually helps others to use your SuperMetrics in their dashboards or views within the same environment. So that way, it's important that you name them properly. What I do for a customer is that I name them according to their project numbers. So if there's a project which requires a specific dashboard or a report, then I put the project number in front of it and then give them the definition. So that way it helps me track the SuperMetrics against specific projects or specific reports which a customer is working on or has requested that SuperMetric for. With that, I'm done with the deck piece. I know we're bang on time in terms of finishing the presentation, but I would leverage another 10 minutes to go ahead and demo the SuperMetrics. All right, let me just quickly...
There's no questions so far, mate, yeah. So you're good.
All right, that's awesome. Thanks for that. Okay, so I have my lab over here. It's basically running on vSAN. And I will just go ahead and show you where the SuperMetrics are. So you just go into Content, and under Content, you'll see SuperMetrics right over here. And in this environment, I do have around 15 SuperMetrics, which I have created for the demo purposes itself, so that I can show you some of them and don't really create them out of the box, right? So these SuperMetrics are all available right on this screen itself. So this is where you would create your own metrics. These are not the out of the box, right? And as you install new management packs, you will see some of this content is being added by the third-party management packs as well. So for instance, if you install a Cisco or an NSX management pack or vSAN management pack, then you might have some additional SuperMetrics added over here. One thing which is important to note is one of the columns over here is hidden, which is the ID. So if I select this, I will get the SuperMetric ID. And you might need it in some cases where you want to go ahead and create a third metric by using 2 SuperMetrics. So you can see an example over here, right? I'm creating data store space remaining percentage, and I'm using 2 existing SuperMetrics over here. And using them, I'm doing a division and a multiplication by 100 and a subtraction by 100 to arrive at a data store space remaining percentage. And this is at a cluster level. So it depends on where am I applying this. And you can see here that this metric is applied at a cluster level. So the object which I'm applying it to is at a cluster level. Now, this is a specific case where a customer said that I want to know what is the total data store space remaining on a cluster level. And I was like, no, you have to have certain principles behind this. You should not share data stores across clusters. If you're not doing that, then this would make more sense. And that was the case. The architecturally, customers were having dedicated data stores per cluster. So we could go ahead and create this SuperMetric for them, and they were able to see what is the data store space remaining on the entire cluster. So this is something which comes out to be one of the use cases, right? And you can think about different data, and you can create SuperMetrics out of it. And then the good news is that you will be able to use all these SuperMetrics into dashboards, reports, views. So if you are able to, or if you're not able to get a specific set of data from a view, because that combination of objects does not allow you to get that data, then you can also always come back to SuperMetrics create a new metric out of using SuperMetrics, and then import or implant that in a view which Simon was showing you a little while earlier. So that's how you can start relating or creating new use cases. Okay, so some of the tabs on the top, you can use the plus sign to create a new SuperMetric. If you want to edit an existing one, then you use the edit button. You can clone existing SuperMetrics if you wish to. You can delete them, but remember, before you delete them, you disable them from the policy, you detach them from the objects, and then you delete them. And then you have a bunch of options around importing and exporting SuperMetric as well. They export in a JSON format, so it's a pretty small file. So let me just export one, and you can see it's just 312 bytes worth of file, and you can open this file in a notepad if you have to. So that notepad, and then you view the SuperMetric if you want to. It's as simple as very text file or text data within that SuperMetric. So, and you can edit it as well if you want to, and before importing somewhere else, like the name, or if you want to edit the formula, then you will be able to do that as well. I would rather edit or create a SuperMetric right on the screen itself, right? So you can just click on the plus sign here and add a new SuperMetric, and here is where you can do all your magic. So things like average, min, max, sum, count, sign, signage, assign, cost, etc. To be honest, I've never used features like sign, cost, tan in here. The most I've gone through is using average, min, max, sum, count is what I use mostly. And you'll see all those features are right on the top. If you are a statistician and you love going beyond this, then you will be able to use absolute and ceiling and some of those features as well. They're all available for you to use it. So average is something which is most commonly used. So I can do an average, and under that I would basically define what object or object type I want to place. Then you have operators. So you can use all these operators over here. You can manually type them. You don't really have to select them specifically. And then you can apply or use this option to ensure that you're applying it on a specific, or you're doing a reference of that particular metric, and not just selecting a specific or tying it down to a particular object. Now, let me give you an example over here, right? Let me just go into one of my existing metrics itself. So let's see, what do we have at a VM level? Okay, interesting. All the SuperMetrics are actually the ones which use depth. So let me create one for you. Okay, so I want to average, and I want to call it virtual machine memory allocated in GB. Let's fetch this. So I know it's a virtual machine level metric or SuperMetric which I'm creating. So I will go into adapter type and select vCenter adapter, because that's what brings in the virtual machine data. And once I do that, I will have all the object types which a vCenter or adapter type of vCenter brings in. So there is where the relations come into picture. So I will just go ahead and select virtual machine. And now for a virtual machine, I will get all the attribute types and all the metrics. So remember, attribute types are not tied to a particular object. Metrics might tie to a specific object. So if you see on the left-hand side, I do have an option to select any virtual machine over here and get metrics for that specific virtual machine. But I would rather not do that. I would go and look at the attribute types and look at, let's say, memory. And you can see that I have total capacity of memory in kilobytes. Now, kilobytes might not be an easy number to reach, so I want to convert that into gigabytes, right? So we know that from KB to GB, we need to basically do a division by 1024 into 1024. So that'll be 1024.1048.576. Now that's where we will do a 2 times translation. So what I'm trying to do is 1024. So if I divide this number, which is the total capacity in kV, by this number, then I will be able to get the total capacity in GB, right? So that's where the formula or the design comes into picture, where you can sit on an Excel sheet, plot down what you need at the end of the day, and then look for metrics which will help you arrive to that particular metric, and then make sure you do all your formula work in Excel. And once you know what your formula is, you can come here and start playing with that, right? Or start creating it. Now, let me just go ahead and move forward with this. So one thing, if I go with average and then I select, let's say, total capacity in kV, you would notice that I'm getting adapter type, object type, attribute, depth is equal to 1. Now, I have not selected this over here, right? And let me just show you if I do the same thing with a specific metric. So I'll select memory, total capacity in kV. Here, you can see adapter type, VMware, object type. Now, this is basically telling me that adapter type is VMware, object is virtual machine, and then this specific metric. This is tied to a particular attribute. If I don't want it to be tied to a particular attribute, it means that I can do total capacity kV across any object where this metric is available, then I can do this. So when I select this and double click on it, you can see that I'm saying this attribute is this $this comma attribute is equal to the name of the metric, how it is in the database. Now this $this basically means that if I'm selecting a ESX server, for instance, and the ESX server has this total capacity kV under memory, then this SuperMetric will automatically convert it into GB. I can apply it at a cluster level, I can apply it at any given level, and that will make sure that I would not be tied down to an object type, right? And then I close the bracket. Basically means that I've done an average of this value, because remember, we might have a array of numbers over here, so we don't want to get into a situation where I'm trying to do or trying to divide 20 different numbers with 1048.576. So I'm doing an average of all those numbers, and then I will just go ahead and divide it with, so I use the / for the divide, 1048.576. So now I'm doing an average of memory total capacity for all the arrays of numbers, and then dividing it by this number. So if I just go ahead and click on Show Formula Description button, it will beautifully lie down or describe the formula for me over here, which is color-coded. Now at this stage, if something is wrong, then you might see a red line. So let's say if I get rid of this specific bracket after average, and you can see the entire box turns red. So I know something is wrong here. So that way it's easy to find out what's going on, right? And sometimes it also tells you what is missing. So that helps you understand what's going on. So if I click here, you can see that it tells me I have a missing bracket. I just saw that. All right, let me just put the bracket back up. And then click here and get everything back to normal. So now my SuperMetric is actually created. Now it's the time to see whether it actually works, right? So what I can do is I can click on Visualize this metric. So I click on Visualize this metric, and that changes this pane to a visual pane, or a pane where I can basically go ahead and visualize this metric, right? And you can see that it's empty right now. It's empty right now because I have not selected any object on which I want to apply this metric. Now, remember, this is just applying the metric for testing it. So this is not going to change anything in your environment. So I know it is a metric which is converting a KB of memory into GB of memory. So that memory is available mostly on virtual machines. So let me just go ahead and select a virtual machine. I have these Photon virtual machines, but I think they would be very small. Yeah, they might be very small or not even powered on right now. Let me just get to some real virtual machines here. Okay. Okay, this looks like, oops. Let's see if I can get to the vCenter server. Yep, there you go. So this is my vCenter server over here. And you can see I've applied this metric and I'm getting the result over here that it has the number 32, right? It basically means it has 32 GB worth of memory over here. So if I do not have, or if I would not divide this with this number, I will get the number in KB, which makes it difficult for me to visualize this. And that's the only reason why I'm doing this and creating this new SuperMetric. And you can visualize it by going back in the past. So I can see last 12 hours data or last 24 hours data and so on and so forth. You can see that at this point of time, everything was 0. So I can also look at it that maybe my vCenter or this machine was powered off and hence everything was 0. But June 27, Monday onwards, I can see data over here on that particular SuperMetric. So this is how you can visualize some of the past data as well. Now that I have my formula secured and I'm getting my expected results, which I can test across different VMs, I can just go ahead and click on Save. Now, as soon as I save it, it will be listed in the list of SuperMetrics. And now I can associate this SuperMetric to a particular object, right? Or object type for that matter. In this case, I will click on the plus sign here and see what object type I want to associate this with. I will just go ahead and select the center adapter and let's say virtual machine, click on select. Now by default, you would see that it's not in any of those policies, right? So it's important that I go ahead and set it up and enable it in a policy for it to start calculating. So let me just quickly go ahead into the administration page, policies, and within policies, I will go to my policy library and the default policy. For me, the default policy is this one. And how you would know is if you go to active policies, wherever you see the D is the default policy, right? And I'll go into my default policy, edit it. And once the edit default policy or edit policy wizard comes in, just go into collect metrics and properties right over here. And then you can see all the 23,683 different metrics or attributes which are available, right? And these are all the attributes on which vROps is configured with and may or may not be collecting on, depending upon what's the state of that attribute. Is it with a checkbox inherited enabled? Is it local disabled? Or is it local collecting, depending upon how your policy is configured? Here you can go ahead and say, I want to figure out or see all my SuperMetrics only. So I'm just filtering out and listing the attribute type by SuperMetric. And you can see all my SuperMetrics which are created. You can see all these SuperMetrics are across all different adapter types and object types. I don't want to apply them on everything, right? The one which I've created. I just want to apply it on virtual machines type. So I will go into object type, go into vCenter adapter, and select virtual machine only. And when I do that, I will only get one filtered out result, which basically means that I can now apply this particular SuperMetric which I've created onto the vCenter adapter type and virtual machine object type. So as soon as I do this, every virtual machine environment will have a new metric which will tell me the virtual machine memory allocation in gigabytes, right? So here, I will just go ahead and select, and I can go ahead and make it locally enabled in this policy, and it'll automatically enable the SuperMetric. I can also do this. I can click on Actions. I can go to State and enable it. I can make it a KPI. I can also start calculating the dynamic threshold on this value if I want to. So you can see that a simple metric which was synthetic, which is completely synthetic and was not available out of the box, you have created it, and now you can go ahead and do all the functions which you do on any different metric within vROps on this metric as well. So let me just go ahead and enable it and save it. And remember this, when you enable and save this, like vCops, the older version, it'll also take 5 minutes for this metric to appear in the system, right? Because it will create this particular attribute, and then it will start the collection or calculating this attribute when the next set of data comes in. So if you plan to create a SuperMetric, make sure you're forward-looking. You will not be able to get any data from the past in a SuperMetric. So somebody gives you that, okay, go ahead and create this new SuperMetric for me because I want to know what happened 3 months back. No, will not work. You might be able to visualize that using the Visualize Data Metric or Data option within the SuperMetric widget or wizard, but you will not be able to save it in the database system, right? So anything which is a SuperMetric is from here on, right, from now and forward. So quickly showing you how they appear before we wrap up the session. So I have a few SuperMetrics which I created for the clusters at the cluster level. So I'll just go ahead and show you those SuperMetrics. Let's see. Okay. So that's one of my cluster. And when I select this, go into troubleshooting, all metrics. For that particular object, I would automatically see all the attributes over here, and you'll see I have a SuperMetric option. And if I click on the plus sign, I can see all the SuperMetrics which I have attached to that particular object, and they will automatically populate. Now, we created some for virtual machine, so one for virtual machine. So let's see if it's showing up now. It usually takes around 5 minutes, so might not see it yet, but let's go ahead and click on it. Yeah, you can see it's not here yet. But if I wait for around 3 to 4 minutes, I will see a similar option with SuperMetric, and when I click on the plus sign next to it, I will see the new SuperMetric which I have created. And then if I click on it, I'll see data points being calculated like they are on the cluster level SuperMetrics. You may end up being wrong. There you go. And if I click on it, it's every 5 minutes worth of collection. So here I am actually doing an average VM CPU contention in a cluster. So for this one, I'm basically going ahead and taking the CPU contention at the VM level and plotting it at the cluster level by doing an average so that I can get the average across the entire population. And I can also do this by using max, and that will basically show me any VM having a RAM contention. So this is the memory contention. I can do max CPU contention. There you go. So I've done this for some of those dashboards. So you can see that I can simply use the principle of average and max, and you can see I have the average CPU contention across all the VMs in a cluster and the max CPU contention across all the VMs in a cluster plotted in a line chart. And that will basically give me a good visibility into if any VM is facing CPU contention in that cluster, and it might be time to add more resources to that cluster if that's happening. So that's one use case which I'm trying to demonstrate over here. Let's see if I've got my SuperMetric at the VM level. Yep, it's there. So you can see I have a SuperMetric here at the VM level now. And if I double click on it, right now there's no data to display because it's still not started collecting. And usually around 5 to 10 minutes, it'll start collecting and you'll see a tiny little data point over here, and it'll keep growing as you see the ones on the top. So yeah, that's a quick overview for SuperMetrics. There are multiple use cases, multiple ways of creating them. What I usually do is for all the dashboards which I create SuperMetrics. I club them out and export them so that I can reuse those dashboards by exporting them into a different environment if I have to. So with that, I think I'm happy, and I should be getting on to any questions if there are, Simon.
I haven't seen any questions come in. I'm going to go ahead and make you the host now, Sunny.
All right. Okay, I do see some questions. I don't know why maybe you're not able to see those. All right, can we use SuperMetrics as a template in reporting? Yeah, that's a good point. Yes, you can. You can basically use SuperMetrics for reporting. So once you created a report metric, it's available for you like any other metric, and you will be able to go ahead and put them in a view and then report them further out using reports. So just to give you an example, over here, let me go to content and views, and I'll quickly try to create a view for you. And when I do that, I first go ahead and give a name to the view. Okay, I'm just waiting for the view widget or wizard to populate. There you go. So it's just a test. And I want to list. So I double click on it and I get the list view as Simon showed you some time back. Go to subjects and add, let's say, I want to add recenter adapter cluster compute resource as the subject. And I want data now. So now you can see you have a new option here of SuperMetrics. So you can go into SuperMetric, which you created earlier, and you can plot them in your view. So I want the max VM IOPS. I want the max VM RAM contention, like max RAM usage, and average VM RAM usage in the cluster. And I can then go ahead and simply preview it on a cluster. So let me just select cluster here, click on OK, and you can see that what is the maximum IOPS I have done on this cluster, what is the RAM contention which I have seen in terms of max, what is the max VM RAM usage which I have seen in this cluster, and average VM RAM usage which I have seen in this cluster. So you can see that very quickly I'm able to put all of this into a view. So I can save this, and then I will be able to put this view in a report, and so on and so forth. All right, so I think that was the only question which I saw. If you have any other questions, you are shy of typing it, then you can unmute yourself by doing *6, and you can also ask that question over the phone. All right, going once, going twice, gone. Okay. With that, I think it was a pretty hefty section on going through those SuperMetrics. It takes some time, guys, so don't worry about if you're not able to get it right on the first go. Just go ahead and give it a try, and I'm sure as you move forward, you will get use cases which will easily get solved due to SuperMetrics. I mean, I can't show you some of the production systems I have, but I have some fancy SuperMetrics created. So I'm creating 5 SuperMetrics to create the 6th one, which actually gives me the result which I wanted. So that way I'm able to traverse through various different objects and get data out which is no longer or was never available in the system. Very powerful feature. I have not seen this feature in any other monitoring product till date. So this is very, very powerful, and I hope this session will help you use this feature in the right way and use the product in the right way as well. With that, I would basically call it the end of the session now. Simon, you have any final comments?
No, that was great. I think everybody here, including myself, learned some new stuff there about SuperMetrics. If there's one thing about SuperMetrics that I know from experience is you don't commonly come up against them unless the customer has been using vCops or vROps for a while and they are aware that there isn't a metric for what they're trying to measure, and that's where SuperMetrics come into play. So that was really informative. Thank you.
All right. Then thank you, Simon, for your time as well early in the morning. And we'll see all you folks on the next session. And hang out for the recording. You'll get it in 24 hours on our blogs. And if you have any follow-up questions, reach out to us on social media through our blogs or through Twitter. And you can also send emails to Simon if you want to.
Thanks very much.
With that, we'll end the session. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Thank you.